Hi everyone, welcome to Tales of Dread. Dennis Martin, a 6-year-old boy from Knoxville, Tennessee, went to the Great Smoky Mountains National Park in June of 1969. It was Father's Day weekend, and his brother, father, and even grandfather went with him. Old age was setting in for his grandfather. But this camping trip was something that the Martins did every year as a family. They set up camp in their usual spot near Russell Field. After dinner, they hung out, talked, and then went to bed. The following morning, after breakfast, they walked a few miles to another favorite campsite closer to the Appalachian Trail. As they were setting up camp, the plan was to spend the night there and leave the next day. The brothers were running around, sword fighting with sticks, throwing mud bombs at each other, and just having fun. A father and his 2 boys came back to their campsite by walking up the trailhead. They stopped and talked for a while with Dennis's father and grandfather. They got along well, and the man eventually asked Dennis's father if he could bring his boys back to play. Dennis's father thought that was a great idea, and said yes. Before they get sick of each other, my boys could use some company. The man came back 30 minutes later with his boys, some hot dogs, and a few beers for everyone to share. The adults sat on some rocks and drank beer while the kids went off to play. The boys decided to play hide and seek. Dennis being the youngest. He was it first, of course. Even though the boys were close together, Mr. Martin kept a close eye on them, especially Dennis, who was only 6 years old, and they were in the middle of nowhere. In this area, there were bears, bobcats, and wild pigs that were known to be dangerous. Mr. Martin would say that he saw Dennis hiding behind a tree, and every time he looked up, Dennis was still hiding behind the tree. When one of the other boys came close, he thought his youngest son had found a good place to hide. After an hour, it was time to eat. Dennis's dad went to get everyone together and made the boys playfully hide so that Mr. Martin would be it. He laughed, but he told them to come out for dinner. So, everyone did. When they got back to camp, which was about 50 yards away, everyone was there except Dennis. Mr. Martin jumped up to go get him. He saw Dennis walk behind the same tree where he had been hiding the whole time they played hide and seek. When he got there, Dennis wasn't there, and he was confused because he had seen him do it. Where else could he go? Mr. Martin ran back to where they were staying. Dennis did not show up. He asked the boys where he was and if they knew where he was hiding. He could tell from their answers that they didn't. At this point, Mr. Martin ran as fast as he could. He got on the Appalachian Trail and ran until he realized that Dennis couldn't have gotten this far in just this short amount of time. People said that Mr. Martin ran more than 2 miles. At the time, the others spread out to look for him, but no one was able to find him. Dennis's grandfather hiked to the Cades Cove Ranger Station to tell the authorities that the boy was missing. They sent a search team right away to look around the area. Dennis's dad and the rest of the family kept looking. It was about 6 o'clock. So there were just a few hours left of daylight. When the park's search and rescue team couldn't find anything, the National Guard and Army Special Forces were called in. They started looking, but the weather wasn't great. A storm system had moved into the area and would eventually dump a total of 3 inches of rain. The day was quickly coming to an end. In the next couple of hours, the torrential rain washed away trails and made it very hard to look for young Dennis. It also washed away any clues that could have helped them find him. Over 1,400 people would be involved in the search for Dennis Martin. On the other hand, some people thought that having so many people searching could have made it harder to find clues. It would be the biggest search in Tennessee's history, covering 56 square miles in the end. Even though over 1,000 people were still looking on June 26, the search was cut back. 3 days later, on June 29, the search was given up, and the official search ended on September 14, leaving no one to know where young Dennis Martin was. A puzzle. The Martin family offered a reward of $5,000, which is about $35,000 today, for any information that would help find their son. A psychic was also hired to help the family find him. Neither of them gave any useful information about where Dennis was. Here's where the story takes another turn, as I've already said. David Politis, an author and researcher, was the first person to write about this story. During his research, he found a very shocking story from a family that was in the Smoky Mountains Park at the same time Dennis Martin went missing. The Key family also happened to be at the park over Father's Day weekend. When they got there, they asked the park staff where they could go to get a good view of the animals. They were pointed in the general direction of where the Martin family had been camping. When the Kay family set up camp and went off to watch animals, they came to the end of a trailhead and heard a high-pitched scream. They knew roughly where the sound had come from, but there was no one or anything there. A few minutes later, they saw, or thought they saw, a bear walk across a mountainside to the north of where they were. But there was something strange about this sighting. About an hour or so after the sighting, park officials would come up to the Key family and tell them that the boy was missing. They were asked if they had seen anything unusual or if they had seen the 6-year-old. Mr. Key began to talk about what he and his family had seen on the mountainside. At first glance, everyone in the family thought the thing on the hillside was a bear. One of the Key children was the first to notice that the bear was holding something that had been thrown over its shoulder. Mr. Key kept saying that the animal they saw on the hillside was definitely covered in hair and gave them no reason to think it was anything but a bear, but then it started to run. It was already walking on 2 legs, but when it ran, it was clear that it wasn't a bear. It was much more nimble as it dodged and ducked through the bushes and trees while carrying something. Mr. Key and his family were amazed. They didn't know exactly what they were seeing. Dennis Martin was missing, but they didn't know it. They gave all of this information to the police. A few weeks later, Mr. Key would be asked again about the meeting. But he never heard from them again after that. When asked about Dennis Martin's disappearance years later, he would say that he knew park rangers didn't believe what he and his family said. He knew that no one had ever found the boy.